The next lot of barriers is the ones around the structure, where there isn't, you know, a lot of the best services that you come across are things where you pay £1 or £2 a month. You just get your credit card out and log on and register with Basecamp, which is a great project management tool, but there isn't an organisational credit card, so you have to do it on your own, and then they won't refund it. So staff sort of say, well, we're not going to do that. That there's no way of backing up, or there's no way of running secure password vaults, and these are all sorts of managerial issues as much as technical ones. That there aren't policies and procedures in place for things like privacy. So if you're working in an organisation that works with children, there aren't any policies and procedures in place for that. And then we move on to the broader issue of policy. There's no guidance on what you can and can't say, and generally if you're not given the guidance on what you can and can't say, you tend not to say anything. So you get organisations whose responsibility it is to go out and explain their mission and involve people in and get feedback, and actually they won't even do the first step where they'll go and tell people what they are because they haven't seen an agreed version of it, if it is, and they're a little bit frightened to do so. And so on. There are 50 hurdles there. And if you go to www.theinteractivecharter.org, you'll find the site that has all of those. The next thing to move on from that is, having identified those, what we've started doing, and this is where I'm asking for your help really, we started using a product called Mixed Ink, which is a tool that's designed for collaborative authoring. And what we wanted to do was to come up with one side of A4 charter, something that says, I as a senior manager in my organisation will work to ensure that my organisation overcomes every one of these barriers that it's possible to overcome. And then you sign it at the bottom. But what we've got to do is and I think that you can't, if you lead on this, it doesn't work. I think you have to say to people, we want a lot of people to collaboratively write that document and call it the Interactive Charter, and then go and put it under as many managers' noses as possible and start to agitate to see if the idea can take off, and if organisations can commit not to responding to individual requests, because you can go through all of the internal procedures where at the end of it, okay, we'll let you off Firefox. But then, oh, but you didn't say you wanted Flash on it, or you didn't say all of those sort of things. I think the idea is to come up with a single charter that as many people as possible can sign, and start pushing it out and start using it as the session we had earlier on open source. This is entirely open source. There's no business model to it. It's something that we want as many people to come up with their own version of this document and put it back into the public domain so other people can share it, and start to share strategies, because often you can get a manager who'll say, okay, I agree in principle, but I actually don't know how to overcome this barrier. So I don't know how. I need good examples of policy guidance on what we as an organisation can and can't say. But, for instance, one of the classic ones is civil servants have an obligation not to be political. They can't say things that are politically contentious. So often it means that they actually don't say anything at all, because it's often hard to think of something that's not entirely politically contentious. So you need to come up with a strategy that enables your staff to be able to explain what you do and be clear about who they are and what they're saying, and leaving stuff open enough to say, look, this is just my view on it, and it's subject to other opinions are available, if you see what I mean. So that's where we are, theinteractivecharter.org. If anyone has any questions or suggestions or ideas on how to take it forward, we'd be interested in hearing you.
Do you find a difference between, say, smaller NGOs and community groups as opposed to sort of the public sector?
Certainly, yeah. If it's the kind of organisation that just gives you a budget to go and buy your own laptop, and if you're working from home, or you have a lot of these things are the subject there's a slightly cynical way of looking at this, that a lot of these things are the product of what they used to call Parkinson's law, that work expands to fill the time allocated to it. And if you have an IT manager who hasn't got anything to do, then the IT manager goes off and writes policies. on things and goes and decides that we need a policy on what browser we're going to install. If you don't have a policy on what browser you're going to install, then you can install any one. So yes, I think certainly there's a direct correlation between the number of people who want to create writing policies and the amount of limitations there are.
I think writing a charter is the best way of breaking this sort of barriers against the social media or internet use in general in these organizations, because these people need to be convinced of the use of open access, and I don't know if a charter is the best way of doing that.
It's often easier to convince people at the top than people in the middle. And if you can get the people at the top to sign the charter, then they. But I agree. It's the least worst way of doing this that we've thought of. But if anyone can think of a better way, then we'd love to hear from you.
Is it possible to do, just sort of follow on from that point, to use examples? Both kind of for and against these. I mean, the military defence of 300,000 machines, which are IE6.
Yes.
And there's a head of security, there's a major security risk there, but also just the negative aspect and the positive aspect. To get a list of people, maybe who like champions, people who are using it well. I think that's probably, most people find it's another thing to do.
Yes.
And they should prove that's doing something, this makes things easier, cheaper, faster.
I think certainly an important part of writing a charter and getting people to sign it is to build up a community of people who, really on all of those barriers, generally you can find, within a large organisation, you can find one person who knows of a nice, easy way around that. And I think it's often a matter of just bringing, just identifying, you're getting someone to say, oh, there is a way around this, and all you need to do is fill out this form and follow this procedure, and the problem solved. So definitely building the community is an important part of it, and that's something that we're hoping to do with the interactive charter site as well.
Are you sort of suggesting like pull together a bunch of case studies?
Sort of just an example of people, case studies of people who are doing it well. So you can have kind of one or two champions, people who are leading it forward. People don't often want to be the first person to do it, but if you can show them an example, maybe if you had 4 or 5, for different size organisations and things.
Yes.
One scale government's going totally wrong. They want to make everything online.
Yeah.
Because somewhere in the things they can deal with a person for 12p instead of costing £15 if they would. And yet it's totally all wrong. Whereas if you use social media in a right way to interact with people, and if you can find examples of it, not necessarily examples has to be from the public, the public sector, but somewhere if you can get list examples, I think that would be great.
Yeah.
I mean, it's often about just social bookmarking. It's about getting somebody who's prepared to do it. If you when you're looking at this, you'll see that. I mean, you can follow the links on the interactivecharter.org site. But one of the links it'll take you to is the original wiki, which is www.practicalparticipation.co.uk/social strategy/barriers. And you'll see that in that wiki has started to build up some case studies and some bookmarks. And it's often a case of just finding the odd article. If you watch the Ideal Government blog, or if you read Mashable or a lot of it, you often find that there is just blog posts where they deal with some of the microeconomics of some of these barriers. So the microeconomic, the classic one is the one I used earlier about Portsmouth City Council. And if you just speak to people at the top of local authorities, and that story has been got out to councillors, and I know that a lot of local authorities have reversed their view on Facebook because of that, because they don't see the downside. It's the classic risk aversion. If you give people 10 reasons to do something, 10 good reasons to do something, and one reason not to do it, the one reason not to do it can often trump it. So it is a matter of, you're right, it is a matter of coming up with good case studies, but there are some referenced, and if you find any, this is intended to be a social project, so if you find more of them, please do add them to the wiki.